many of you recognize that tune? Good morning, darling. Today I'm going to talk, as per your request, about my marriage to Al Wilsey and the blow-up end of it. Oh, Lordy, I'm going to go through that again. But nonetheless, it's very interesting. I hope you find it so. Let's drink our coffee together. I'm getting such a collection of interesting cups, aren't I? That's something. Okay, sweetheart, let's go with this romance. And it was a romance. It began with a phone call from Gerson Baker, who is very well known in the Bay Area. And it turned out he was a business partner of Al Wilsey. I had dated him a couple of times, and we just didn't really have any chemistry. But he called and he said his partner, Al Wilsey, would really like to take me out. And would it be all right for him to call me? So I said, okay. Now, at that time, I had my television show. And oh my goodness, I got so many obscene phone calls. And then we didn't have caller ID, we didn't have answering machines. So I would always answer and then hang up, before I could hear more heavy breathing. Jesus, what's wrong with guys who do that? Anyway, when Al Wilsey called me on my Pink Princess phone, his voice did not appeal to me. He sounded like he was an obscene phone caller. He really did. He had the voice of, Pat, hi, this is Al Wilsey. And I go like, oh my God. So I turned him down for a date. And he called again. And I turned him down the second time. And he had said, he told me later, he was going to call me one more time. And if I didn't accept, that was it. So he called me. And it so happened I was feeling kind of bereft. And he said to me that he lived just up on Russian Hill from me, and that his son, Lad, whom I adored after I got to know him, was home with him at his house, recovering from a skiing accident. He'd broken his leg. And so I said, well, I can't stay long. And he said, that's okay. My cook has made leg of lamb, and I thought you might want a good warm meal. So I said, okay. So when he arrived, a good-looking guy, but he was driving a rattle-trap car. I mean, unfortunately, cars mean a lot to me, more than they do now. And if people drive up in a rattle-trap car, I immediately make a judgment about them. And I thought, who is this guy that he's in business with Gerson Baker? Why can't he drive a decent car? Anyway, he took me up to this penthouse. He had just bought it. And I didn't know he'd bought the entire building, darling. I had not a clue. But he took me up to this penthouse at 999 Green, 32nd, 33rd floor. And I walked in and I thought, this is the worst place I've ever been in. I really did, because he had very little furniture, and whatever furniture he had came from a house he had had in Marin. And so the scale didn't suit this place. But the view was spectacular. And he had a housekeeper, an African-American woman who had a baby, and the baby was running around underfoot, And we had dinner with the baby at our feet, and I would play with the baby, but I'm thinking, what a weird household. And then I had a TV show that I had taped in New York. I think it was Joan Rivers' show. And I said, I really would like to watch this show. It was about my book, How to Be a Party Girl. And Al said, oh, well, you can come in here. We have a TV in the maid's room. So I go in and we sit on the floor and watch me. And then I said, well, I've got to go home. And he said, well, good, because I'm ready to go to bed. It was early, And I said, okay, I'd heard that before. So, he was very mannerly. He was the kind of guy that I do believe any girl would fall for eventually. And they did. I was like fighting them off like fleas on a dog after a while. It was like, who are these women? Married women were after Al Wilsey. And many of them got him, I must say, even when I was married to him. I'm trying to hide this thing I'm wearing because it's so distracting. Big smiling mouth. Maybe it's good to be distracting. Anyway, later on, Al Wilsey, after a couple of dates where we just didn't do much of anything, and I was always carrying this ratty old bag that I used for all my makeup and books and whatever I needed at the studio, and it really was ratty. So Al Wilsey noticed that, and he got his secretary, Peggy, whom I got to know later, I really got to know, and he had her go out and buy some bags for me. I received like 6 beautiful bags. Not for me to choose from, darling, but for me to have all of them. Because Al Wilsey said, you're much too beautiful to be carrying around those ratty bags. And I thought, that sounds good to me. So that was kind of the beginning. And the next thing I knew, my studio was full of flowers. Oh, it was a talk of KGO. I had so many flowers I could hardly get into my dressing room. And I always teased Jim Dunbar, who shared the dressing room with me for the morning show, that he used my lipstick. I always told him that. And, he would tease me about the whole thing. So, little by little, I became very fond of Al Wilsey, and he was such a gentleman. And little did I know, of course, hindsight, isn't it wonderful? But I wouldn't have changed anything. Well, I would have changed something later on. But he said to me one evening at his penthouse, Patsy, he called me, Patsy, you can do anything you want to with this penthouse. And I said, well, what about your American Airlines chair? That's what I called it. He had this chair in the middle of his living room so he could look at the view. And it was really like an American Airlines chair. It was so ugly. And he said to me, Patsy, before I met you, I used to sit in that chair and think about my life. And his previous wife had died from cancer, and he took care of her until she died. And he said, I was just thinking I had no reason to live. And he said, you saved my life. And of course I was very touched by that. And it was undeniable that we had chemistry between us. And I loved his son, Lad. What a character. He was lovely and so charming and nice. And Al had another son, Mike, who was in Singapore on a scholarship and working there. And he had 2 daughters as well. And I hadn't met them, but then I did meet Wendy right away because Wendy was staying with Al. When Al broke up with his first wife, Doris, she moved to Hawaii. And Al took the boys and Doris took the girls. And that's how they split the family. And Wendy, of course, had not had the joy of living with her father, except when she was really little. And she had come there and was living with him, and he had taken her on a cruise to Europe just before he met me. So here I am, the interloper in the family. And I didn't know what it would be like to have a stepdaughter or a stepchild of any child. You know, I'd never had a baby. I was 39, and there was a lot to unfold in this relationship. But I fell in love with the man. I really did. Okay, babe, have your coffee. Let's say goodbye for now. There'll be another installment.